James.
My name is Jaysha Ray.
Hello, my name is Lucas.
My name is Mike Thibodeau.
My name is Knowledge Build Hudson.
My name is Michelle Flores.
My name is Viola Nizigama.
My name is Rebecca Sewald.
My name is Daniel James II.
Hi, my name is Herb Tyson.
Hi, I'm Maya Williams.
This
is
NTIA
in one
word.
If I had to describe NTIA
in one word,
it would probably be
dedication,
communication,
innovate,
access,
welcoming,
Thoughtful.
Connections.
transformative.
I would use the word courageous.
Generation.
future.
And I say that because
Internet is not a luxury, it is a necessity in this day and age.
Technology being the center of everything in the future, sci-fi.
And watching the NOFO process and then the evaluation process, the review process to implementation.
I think there's definitely been some kind of a spirit of community and a spirit of engagement between everybody.
Across NTIA, everyone is so dedicated to the mission. And with that dedication, sometimes comes sacrifices.
It's all about the ability of individuals to communicate, nations to communicate, governments to communicate, businesses to communicate, and exchange ideas under security, under safety, and broaden the knowledge base that makes societies better.
I work a lot with our Internet for All initiative, and a large part of that is, how do you connect people to the internet?
Not only are we providing leaps and bounds of innovation through enabling access to the internet across the United States,
people need digital highways to have access to jobs, healthcare.
In order to ensure that people have opportunities for economic development, opportunities to change their lives, and utilizing internet devices as well as digital skills in order to improve themselves.
We're also creating connections between NTIA and elected officials and their staffs.
The work NTIA does affects families.
NTIA is doing a lot of that groundwork to get us there.
They used my headshot from my board membership for the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness Foundation. So I'm out in wilderness enjoying everything that Montana has to offer. Hello and welcome to all of you in the room. We're so pleased to have you here. I'm Grace Stevens. I'm the Federal Program Officer for the state of Montana. And welcome virtually to Montana to the over 100, I think, participants that we have online. That's fantastic. I'd also like to say that this presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to our organization by MCAT, so thank you. So I'm not a Montanan by birth, but my husband is. And he was born in the tiny town of Pine Creek, which is about 10 minutes south of where we now live with our 3 children. I am a native North Carolinian, and the first time that I came out to Montana, early in our relationship with my husband, I had never traveled west of the Mississippi. And the first time we came out here and he showed me the Paradise Valley, I had 2 realizations in short order. The first was that I was going to marry him, and the second was that we would one day call this state our home. I was simply overwhelmed with Montana. The vastness, the beauty, the sky, the mountains, the prairie, the rivers, the space. But the things that make our state so spectacular are also the things that make it so challenging to deliver to every Montanan affordable, high-speed, future-proof internet and the devices and the skills and the knowledge to access all that it has to offer. And those same qualities are what make our communities particularly vulnerable. We have a lot of space in Montana. We are the 4th largest state. We are the largest landlocked state in the United States, but we are the 43rd most populous. And so our rural, far-flung communities really need to be able to access remote services like telehealth and education and jobs. But yet those communities are far more likely to have high numbers of vulnerable populations, as I probably don't have to tell all the people in this room. I'm really proud of the over $7.5 million that NTIA has invested in Montana specifically for digital equity. And I would invite all of you, if you haven't already, to read the Digital Opportunity Plan that is on the Connect Montana website. I think a lot of you had a hand in developing that plan, and I thank you for that effort. And I also thank you for all of the organizations that have contributed to make sure that the forthcoming DE capacity funds are providing equitable access to broadband throughout our state. And we're so pleased to also have you here today to talk about the competitive program that just opened up. And I'm very pleased to pass the mic to our regional director, Robin Madison, to talk a little bit more about digital equity efforts throughout the Great Northern Plains.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. As Grace mentioned and did a really great job of talking about Montana, I'm just going to give a little snapshot of what is happening within the region. We consider ourselves sort of in the Northern Plains, but as somebody who's from Montana, I feel like I'm sort of in the Mountain West. So I'm a little conflicted with that description. But here in the Northern Plains region, as well as the West, as you all know, we have greater miles between us compared to any other region in the United States. That also includes a lot of dirt between light bulbs, as some folks like to say. So it's more important than ever that people, not only our covered populations, but everybody, including businesses and schools and community anchor institutions, have access to fast and reliable internet. But what is even more important is to making sure that the folks that are at those locations have the digital skills and the devices and the education to be able to utilize internet to the fullest of their capability. Whether it's libraries like this loaning out devices, or high school students in Wyoming teaching seniors how to use a computer, or in Nebraska, where their economic development agency teaches low-income folks how to start businesses. There's so many great ideas happening across this region and not only in Montana that I hope today we have a chance to not only elevate the topics and some of the efforts that the folks here on the panel are doing great work, that also the people online can get some ideas about what may work best for you and your organization, your agency, but really making sure that we're sharing our ideas because there's already a lot of really great ideas happening here in the region. So thanks for having us. Thanks for the folks who are here in the room and online. And now I'm going to pass it to Slavin, who is our fantastic host, to talk a little bit about all the great things that are happening here at the Missoula County Public Library. Thanks.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Missoula Public Library. I'm Slavin Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the library. I have a few moments today to talk to you a little bit more about this building in particular and then about the digital equity work that we're doing here at MPL. It's difficult to tell you everything in a short period of time, so I'd be happy to chat more another time if that would be helpful. First, we acknowledge that the Missoula Public Library sits on the ancestral homeland of the Bitterroot, Salish, and Kalispel peoples. These lands were acquired by dispossession and attempts at deliberate and systematic destruction of indigenous culture. We recognize that acknowledging the colonial past of Montana and upholding indigenous voices helps us move forward collectively. Missoula Public Library commits to actively working to increase indigenous engagement and access by providing a welcoming space on their homelands, which celebrates and showcases indigenous voices through programming, art displays, art collections, and Salish language signage. The Missoula Public Library is referred to as all under one roof because we are the first library in the country to replicate a Scandinavian model of culture houses. Back many years ago, the planning for this building began, and a group of library leaders and community leaders traveled to Sweden to learn more about this model. When they returned, they found partners to have all under one roof here in the library. So we have organizations co-located in this building that provide services here in the building and beyond. So those organizations are MCAT, who are helping out here in the back and help us out in many ways. They really push digital equity forward in many ways by providing podcasting workshops, video editing workshops, 2 TV stations, a radio station, and more. Then there's the University of Montana Living Lab, which is often referred to as a brain lab. They do brain development studies with children and families. We have the Spectrum Discovery Museum, which is a free STEM museum here in the library that offers services and classes, but also summer camps oriented around STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And then they have their free museum, and they take their services out all over the state. And then finally, there's Families First, who they offer family counseling, programs for kids, parenting classes, social services, and then learning through play activities here in the building. Just need to expand my notes. Sorry about that. So we amplify our impact through collaboration. This is called collective impact. I won't really get into what that means today, but it's how we have a bigger impact on the community together. Our model of that Scandinavian culture house that I mentioned focuses on family development, cultural literacy, and then interactive STEAM activities alongside of traditional library services that you would expect from a library. An example of how this can look is that a kid can attend a space program with an astronaut here in this room for free, or they could go see a Life on Mars exhibit in the museum, as I mentioned. Then they could check out a book about the subject, make a Martian craft, and then go make a YouTube video about it in MCAT all in one day. So that's digital equity, all for free in this building. We have many spaces for shared creativity here in the new library. In particular, our makerspace offers freely accessible 3D printing, laser engraving, sewing classes, and much more. So that's a place where people can go for free and use those materials, use that technology, and learn about it, which increases their digital skills. But what I know from working in public libraries for 25 years is that what really moves digital equity forward is the people. So people who are trained and work in the library, who offer technology assistance, who help people check things out, who set up devices for people, those experts on the library staff are what make digital equity improve in a community. We also offer more traditional digital equity resources like classes. The Windows user group is an example. We recently acquired BrainFuse, which is a database where students and teachers can log in and get live tutoring help from anywhere in the county as long as they're a library card holder. So that's something that we're really excited about and that we hope increases digital equity skills, improves digital equity in the community. Nearly 10% of Missoulians live below the poverty line, and 9.5% do not have their own personal internet access, so the Wi-Fi here in the building is really important, as you can imagine. There was a big storm here in Missoula County in July that left people without power, water, internet for several days. This building acts as a sanctuary all the time to people, but especially after that storm, the first day after the storm, we ran out of seats practically. There were people sitting on the floor. The building was just so full of people who needed a place to come and charge their devices, use the internet, all of those sorts of things. So we saw a 76% increase in our Wi-Fi sessions in the 4 days after that storm. So that was over 33,000 sessions in 4 days, and then serving about 2,000 people with free Wi-Fi in 4 days. MPL also has laptops for checkout in use in the building. We have hotspots that we lend, free desktop computers that people can use, printers, that sort of things, and then of course hotspots. I think I said that. We also really focus on taking our services outside of the building because, again, it's the people that really advance people's digital skills. So having our staff go out into the community, engage with others is a way that we really move that needle and help people out. So during our strategic planning process, we discovered that community members were expressing that they experience isolation, siloing of resources, the need for connection, and also just a lack of time to visit the actual library. So leaving the building and leaving our branches has been really important to us in the last year or so. We also recently acquired a new bookmobile. It's a very traditional bookmobile. It will have books and STEAM kits and that sort of thing for people to check out. But again, the staff on that bookmobile will be out in the community helping others learn about our services, connect them with our digital resources on their phone, show them databases, that sort of thing. So we're really excited to get the bookmobile out in the community. And again, having people visit, apartment facilities, block parties, farmers markets, all of that, we're really seeing a lot of results around bringing new people into the library and helping people out. Just last week, we were at the Franklin to the Fort block party, and staff were able to help a woman who was double masked, told us she had MS and couldn't come to the library. And she said, the building's beautiful, but I can't go there anymore, but I'm glad you're here. And we were able to reactivate her library card, show her the Libby app, get her set up with digital resources so that now she's a library user again. And that's huge, and that's why community engagement is so important. And then finally, this building is amazing, but what makes the building work is all of these partners and all of the people helping everyone out in the building. So we're doing great things around digital equity, but I feel like we can do so much more. So that's why I'm really glad to learn from you all today. So thank you.
Well, that was really cool to learn about. Thank you guys for having us here in your space today. You're doing some amazing work. Halito, good morning. My name is Rebecca Seawald. I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and an intergovernmental affairs advisor here at NTIA. And today I wanted to talk to you all about some highlights from our tribal broadband connectivity program. For too long, tribal lands have been among the least connected to high-speed internet service. As you all know, the internet is now the essential tool for communications in our modern world. And yet here we are in 2024, and millions of people across the country, especially on tribal lands, lack access to a high-speed internet connection or lack the means and tools to use it. We've been talking about the digital divide in this country for over 25 years, but thanks to President Biden's leadership and bipartisan work in Congress, we now have the resources to do something serious about it. The Internet for All initiative has a simple but ambitious goal, which is to connect every American to reliable, affordable, high-speed internet service. NTIA's Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program is a key part of how we make that happen. Congress established the Tribal Connectivity Program at the height of the COVID pandemic in December of 2020. This first-of-its-kind grant program addresses the persistent, longstanding digital divide on tribal lands. And I think we all know and have heard stories from the pandemic of students who had to drive to school parking lots to complete assignments. Maybe there was only one laptop in a home for them to be able to complete that work, of trying to access telehealth, but not having the connectivity that we need to do that. So we're very proud of our work to date on this program. We've awarded grants covering 226 projects, which total more than $1.86 billion. We also have 4 projects here in the state of Montana, totaling more than $140 million. And then we also just recently completed our second notice of funding opportunity, which closed in March of 2024, that made it available an additional nearly $1 billion in future funding. We received more than 160 applications, totaling more than $2.6 billion in requests. So NTIA intends to begin making awards under the second NOFO this quarter, and we'll continue making awards on a rolling basis. And our goal with this program, kind of similar to the work that we're doing in digital equity and things like that, is that infrastructure is a very important component, but it's the first half of it. And this project also allows for use and adoption, which we like to look at as the second half, because you could have a connection, but if you don't know how to use it, or if you don't have the device you need to access it, or the availability to connect, then what good does that connection do you? So especially for tribal nations, this is really important to, one, allow for that connectivity for things like telehealth in school, but also for language preservation. We have some really cool projects where tribes are preserving their languages for future generations using digital technology, also allowing connection to generations or tribal members that may have had to move away from their homelands, but then they can connect with their grandparents or elders or other members of the community. So it's more than just putting fiber in the ground. There's a lot of other big components that go to this project, and I think it's a really neat one to work on to kind of give a whole perspective of how we can preserve the culture that's important to these nations and also help them in moving forward in the digital economy. So these funds are part of President Biden's commitment to strengthening nation-to-nation relationships and supporting tribal sovereignty and self-determination. So we're excited to see where these projects go. We're very much in the beginning stages, but as we start to break ground and work on them, I think it's going to be a very big move for Indian country. So we're also excited for the digital equity capacity grants. That'll be a big step forward for tribes as well. So thank you all, and we'll pass it on to, I think, Director Angela Bennett has prepared remarks.
Greetings, everyone. It's a true honor to virtually join you in Missoula, a place where community values are rooted in collaboration, resilience, and ensuring that every person feels seen and heard. My name is Angela Bennett, and I am privileged to serve as the Digital Equity Director under the United States Department of Commerce's National Telecommunications and Information Administration. My pronouns are she, her. Today, as we gather to discuss digital equity and inclusion, I want to begin with a reminder of something simple yet deeply profound: worthiness. In every community, whether in urban centers or rural towns like Missoula, we share a common goal: to ensure that all individuals and families are equipped with the tools and opportunities they need to thrive. But for too long, digital access has been seen as a luxury rather than what it truly is, a necessity. And as we talk about closing the digital divide, I ask that we keep front and center the understanding that every person in this room, every person across Montana and across this country is worthy of the same access to information, education, and opportunity. It's about more than just connecting homes with broadband. It's about connecting people to possibilities. When we talk about digital equity, we are really talking about human dignity, about ensuring that everyone has the chance to fully participate in society, to access education, to apply for jobs, to connect with loved ones, and to exercise their rights as human beings. As Maya Angelou once said, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. This is at the core of our work today. Digital equity is not just about providing services. It's about making people feel worthy, like they belong in this conversation, and like their needs and dreams matter. Whether we're distributing devices, improving broadband access, or teaching digital skills, we are doing the work of affirming the value of every individual. The single mother seeking a better future for her children, the small business owner trying to reach new markets, or the student dreaming of being the first in their family to graduate. These are the people whose lives are transformed when we prioritize digital equity. Here in Montana, I know there are unique challenges to reaching everyone. From the vast landscapes to the remote communities, it takes dedicated, innovative solutions. But with those challenges come opportunities. Opportunities for us to work together, to bridge the gaps, and to create a lasting impact that will serve future generations. Missoula and Montana as a whole has the chance to lead in showing what true inclusivity means. By making sure that no one is left behind in this digital age, we can ensure that every person, no matter their background or zip code, can be a part of our collective progress. And as we continue this important work, I encourage all of us to keep asking, how can we make sure everyone feels worthy of connection? How can we use digital equity as a tool to lift up entire communities? And how can we ensure that in this journey, every person feels valued and empowered to participate in the digital world? We are all here because we believe that closing the digital divide is about more than technology. It's about justice. It's about creating a future where everyone has the opportunity to be seen, to be heard, and to succeed. And together, I know we can achieve that future. And remember, hope is not just an idea, it's a responsibility. Let's keep building bridges, making connections, reasons to believe that they are worthy of every opportunity this world has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for adjusting that, Daniel. And I'm excited that so many of you guys are in the room. You guys are a little bit of a quiet crowd today, but we're about to get revved up and talk to some of the people that are working in this community. I'll start by telling you a little bit about me and that pre-COVID picture, but this really is me. And telling you a little bit about how I arrived in this work, and then also some of the things that we're going to talk about on today's panel. So first of all, my name is Francello Chillo. I'm really excited to be here. This is now my 34th state. This is my first time to Montana, and I cannot tell you, I did not expect the type of warm welcome. And I don't mean the formal welcome by people who are working on this project. I mean the welcome by the people on the streets, in the grocery store, at the front desk, the people who are in housekeeping, the people who are doing the things that other people don't always see. And one thing that always means a lot to me when I go to communities, when I travel to places, is that tells me everything that I need to know about communities when people think about how they actually relate to each other, making sure that they see each other, that they acknowledge each other, that they say please and thank you, and that they actually hold each other. And I think that so much of the work that we do is just about making sure that we are taking care of each other. And in my view, this is how we show love. I started this work back in 2018 with an organization that I was focused on expanding broadband access and doing a host of other digital related adjacent activities, all related through the FCC, NTIA, and FTC. So I worked on a range of things from getting people connected to worrying about their data privacy and sharing, and even thinking about content moderation. A few years later, I started to really focus in on broadband access specifically. And when I came into this work, quite frankly, back then, no one was calling it digital equity. Everyone was focused on broadband access. And really the issue du jour was about making sure that people got the right infrastructure in their communities. Fast forward to around 2018, 2019, when the more communities that I visited, I was working for an organization where I actually worked on helping their local governments come up with broadband strategies. And it didn't matter where I went, whether I was in a small town in Ohio or a bigger town in Washington or even a place in California. It didn't matter where I went. The urgency, the desperation, the making sure that this is about making sure that we lift people up, it was the same. It didn't matter where I went. And one thing I think about now that we have billions with a B of dollars being invested into these programs, as I think about what will be the story that people tell about us 10 years from now and 15 years from now, when we got the thing we wanted, did we do everything that we needed to do to change the digital landscape? Because we have choices. And I think we need to think carefully about the investments that we're making, about making sure that we're speaking up for the communities, not only the ones that do have agency and know how to file comments and reach out to their program officers, but are we reaching out to the people, to Slavin's point, that maybe are wearing 2 masks and don't know who to ask? And so I want to make sure that when we come into this conversation today, we're not just talking to the people in this room, we're talking to people online, and we're also talking to people who are decision makers. Tell your true stories, tell people how to get better, tell people what you need, tell people what's going well, but here's where we can get even better than what we did last year. And I don't think that there's shame in that. I think the shame in this will be if we wait and get to the end of these programs and feel like we didn't get it right. And so part of my goal in having this conversation with obviously exemplary organizations that are across the state of Montana today, I want to make sure that we're also thinking about the organizations that aren't represented on this panel, the ones that are doing the hard work, that show up in communities and don't get fanfare or applause. Those organizations matter too. So I just want to make sure that we're making room, even for those of you who are in this room, especially the librarians, who I always love librarians, that we are lifting up your organizations. So at the end of this program, we'll have an opportunity to even hear from the things that you are most proud of. And if you have one piece of advice for your state or your broadband officer, that we want to create space for you to share that. So turning to our panel today, I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to hear not only about the composition of their organizations, how they got involved in some of the broadband access and adoption work that they're doing, also acknowledging that depending on where we live, the language that we use is different. Because sometimes to Angela, to the Director of Digital Equity for NTIA, she talks a lot about digital equity, when sometimes I'm in an office. Many years ago, when I spoke to people in the Northern Plains and Midwest, they called it digital opportunities. It doesn't matter what you call it, we want to make sure that people can get online. So I just want to acknowledge that even though our language and our semantics might be slightly different, our goals are the same, into making sure that everyone has choices. And then as a final point, when we circle back, every single one of these panelists will get to share their thoughts on what's next. And I think that it's important for any of you who have worked on not only advocacy, but also really helping to build this movement, the reason why we're even here at this moment with this much funding available. Part of it is that we need to have a vision for what we want. And it's not enough for us to just settle for this is what's on the table. We also have to actually be thinking about where are we trying to go next. And so I'm excited to be joined by my esteemed colleagues here today. We're going to hear from representatives from the Montana Digital Academy, from the Montana State Library, our illustrious co-host. This is an amazing library. Also from an organization called Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow, and then the Northwest Regional Telehealth Resource. So I will ask for you guys to turn on the mic. And I am going to start with you, Jason, all the way at the end by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. Number one, tell us about their organization's work on broadband access and adoption. And also, if there is a current project that you are particularly proud of, feel free to start that now.
Testing. There we are. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Neifer, and I'm the Executive Director of Montana Digital Academy. And MTDA has been around for 15 years. In fact, we're entering our 15th year right now. And we provide digital learning courses and services to students across the state of Montana. And although our primary focus is K-12, over the last several years, we've expanded our mission quite substantially to provide a vast suite of digital services to students across the state. During the 2023-2024 school year, we had our largest delivery of services to this point, which includes 3 different styles of services. We have our traditional distance learning program, which the easiest way to describe this, especially for folks that live in Montana, is that if you're in Eureka in the far northwestern part of the state, or Ekalaka in the southeast part of the state, and you want to take German or an AP class, then we're the best avenue to do that, as we provide a full course with a Montana public school teacher in an online environment that we have consistently made better and better and better over the years. The second program we offer, due to a generous gift from the Washington Foundation, is something referred to as EdReady Montana, which is a wonderful suite of proficiency-based education tools that's particularly useful in math transitions. Think 8th grade to 9th grade math, or high school senior to college freshman transitions. The MTDA suite is really great to provide that service, which is developed by NROC, a nonprofit that works in this space. And the 2023 legislature also tasked us with developing what is now known as the Digital Learning Clearinghouse, which is a large catalog of digital learning services for schools across the state to help deliver everything from local online courses to simulations that are useful in CTE courses. Our program has expanded and shifted focus occasionally over the years, but our focus is always the same. How do we get digital learning opportunities in the hands of students across the state? As Grace mentioned earlier, Montana is a vast geography. The way we talk about out-of-state folks is that we're approximately the size of the country of Germany, with 1/80th of the population. And I know that Missoula, for example, is seen as a rural city outside the state of Montana, but let me assure you, there's much more rural than this in the vast landscape of the state. And the dusty back roads of Montana look nothing like Missoula, and yet have Montana's working population and their children in schools, and we work really hard to make sure that those students have access to really great digital learning services. There's lots of our program that we're particularly proud of, but talking a little bit about what Rebecca talked about earlier, we were tasked by the 2021 legislature to enter the conversation about preservation of indigenous languages. And over the last 3 years, we've worked to develop not only distance learning curriculum, but also are now offering high school courses in Crow and Cree, and we now have distance learning opportunities in Nakota and Dakota languages that we've worked out with direct consultation with tribal entities across the state. And I think that's just one example of the work that we do. But what I'm so encouraged about the conversation today is obviously access is extraordinarily important, and we want to make sure that everyone, no matter their location or circumstances across the state, has that access. But it's as important to think about what happens when you get that access. And in a world where we have questions about whether or not students should have cell phone in schools, and do we have too much access, what's the impact of social media, and all the extraordinary questions that are posed about what happens when you give people access to everything the internet has to offer. And of course, that's made much more complex in the age of artificial intelligence. What we do with that information and how we develop that skills remains absolutely key.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning. My name is Jenny Stapp, and it's my privilege to be the Montana State Librarian. The Montana State Library is an agency of state government, and one of our responsibilities is to ensure that all Montanans, through their libraries, have access to excellent library resources and services. And we have been involved in supporting access to the internet through Montana libraries really since the late 1990s, when we were contracting with people to go into libraries' physical facilities and helping them to wire for the internet for the very first time. And we've continued that work now over the decades. I just want to share a little bit of context for also the work of libraries. You heard some of that from Slavin. And Montana is blessed by remarkable libraries across the state. There are about 116 libraries. 90% of those libraries offer Wi-Fi access outside their buildings. 38% of Montana libraries provide resources to extend their broadband into their communities. 88% of Montana libraries provide 24-hour access to their internet services. And to show the importance of the learning and education that Montana librarians make available to Montanans, in last fiscal year, there were nearly 57,000 tech sessions offered by Montana librarians to citizens through Montana libraries. The use of Wi-Fi, Slavin, I was shocked by the statistic you shared about the Wi-Fi use after the storm. That's remarkable. Wi-Fi use last year in Montana libraries totaled 2.3 million sessions. That's a 10-fold increase over the last decade. We all have devices, and we're bringing them to our libraries to make use of them. A couple of things that I'm most proud of in recent years with some of the COVID-related funding, we have helped to support the hotspot program that Slavens described. We have worked with libraries to circulate nearly 1,000 hotspots in 53 counties around the state since the start of the pandemic. With feedback from users, we know that 49% of those users are using those hotspots for either educational or workforce and job search related purposes. So as Jason mentioned, those learning opportunities, what they do with that is as important, and making sure that they have the skills to understand how to use the devices and then apply those devices to help them thrive is critical. And we're continuing to support that effort with some one-time only funding from the state of Montana. And then we also used some of our COVID-related funding to improve the overall internal wiring in libraries. Prior to the pandemic, the state library had conducted a study of some of the barriers that libraries face in order to provide broadband access to their communities. And we know that one of the biggest barriers they were facing is just the outdated and inadequate internal wiring for them to take advantage of the broadband that might be available to them. Through our COVID-related funding, we've been able to help approximately 35 libraries upgrade their internal wiring technologies. We hope to have more funding to be able to continue to extend that work to additional library outlets. Just to give you an example of the impact that that effort has had, the Darby Community Library just south of here, prior to this investment, was able to offer about 30 megabits of service to their community. Now their average speed is over 400 megabits of service with an investment of about $21,000. Not a lot of money went into that significant improvement, and we're really grateful that at the State Library we have the opportunity to make those kinds of programs and services available to all libraries and then all Montanans in their communities.
It all started in 2020 when Lyft received a grant of $2,500 to promote digital inclusion. Can you imagine that? We are talking about millions of dollars offered by the Digital Equity Act, and Lyft started working with $2,500. What did we do? We bought hundreds of Echo Dots with Alexa to promote inclusion of the aging and the disabled individuals of our service area. Individuals with cerebral palsy, blind, people with all types of disabilities need an Echo Dot. And if you could see the smile on their faces when they asked Alexa, let's talk.
Their mic is off.
And the surprise. The surprise that the individuals with cerebral palsy showed in their faces because Alexa could understand them, respond to their questions. Then COVID came, and we realized that to provide our services and reach out to the communities we serve, we needed technology. And we didn't have the Digital Equity Act or any type of funding. And thanks to the generosity of the Phyllis and Dennis Washington Foundation, the Sample Foundation, Charles Bear Family Trust, the Lions Club, we were able to conceive and build an ADA accessible state-of-the-art website, which I invite you to visit www.liftt.org. And then following that, we conceived and launched an app, a portable website. We are a center for independent living. There are 400 centers for independent living in the United States. Lyft is the only one that offers services through an app, and the only one that has a state-of-the-art ADA accessible website that includes the blind, the deaf, and people with all types of disabilities, including colorblind people. We invested thousands of dollars in all types of technology that instantly make the information that empowers them available, no matter where they are and what type of disabilities they have. Lyft serves the 18 counties of central and southeastern Montana. Yellowstone, as you know, it's the largest county in Montana, the largest population. Now it has 150,000 inhabitants. But we serve counties like Webull, Treasure, Carter, Dawson, and rural, extreme frontier counties that cities have from 50 people to 2,000 or 500 or sometimes less. And after COVID, we are dealing with an interesting phenomenon. The cities are growing smaller, which makes it more difficult to provide services and more expensive the access to technology. Lyft provides a series of 6 core services like every other center for independent living in the nation. The most fundamental services is called information and referral. We gather and curate information about resources that will help people live independently, and we disseminate that information using technology. Or we have walk-ins, we have phone calls, but we have a resource guide that we make available digitally. We also promote advocacy, individual and collective. We are advocates on behalf of the aging and the disabled community, and we try to promote individual and system change. And the Digital Equity Act is an amazing tool of system change, an amazing opportunity to make Montana turn around, and instead of being known as the Lebanon of the United States, become hopefully the Switzerland of the United States, because only digital technology can help us solve all the problems and integrate this huge geographical area. It was interesting here, Francella saying that wherever she goes, she identifies the same need. As you know, we can fit more than 50 Rhode Islands in the state of Montana. But we have less than the population of this state of Rhode Island in Montana. Again, another challenge, another opportunity for us to think outside the box. I don't know about the other organizations, but Lyft cannot wait to start spending the Disability Equity Act dollars. We already have 100 ideas of how to promote inclusion, equal access, equal opportunity, and I will mention only one for you now. The children of the excluded and marginalized groups are future marginalized and excluded ones. It's like learning to drive. Who taught you how to drive? How did you learn to drive? I learned to drive it by driving with my parents and eventually trying it on my own. And because they knew how to drive and they owned a vehicle, it was easy for them to teach me to drive. But when it comes to technology, those who are marginalized, who do not have a computer, do not have a broadband internet services at home, do not know how to use an iPhone, they cannot teach their children or their grandchildren. So Lyft conceived a digital mentorship program in which they included those who are tech savvy and have access to that type of knowledge will volunteer to transfer, volunteer to download that information into the youngest population. One of the questions that we will answer today is, what do you expect Montana to be 10 years from today? I expect us to start investing in those who are 10 years old today and attending elementary school, middle school. 10 years from now, they will be 20 years, and they need to be included in this new age, this new era of empowerment through information and technology. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nikki Parashow, and I'm the program director at the Northwest Regional Telehealth Resource Center, NRTRC for short. It's quite the mouthful. The NRTRC is a federally funded program. It's funded through HRSA, so the Health Resource Services Administration, and the Office for Advancement of Telehealth, to provide technical assistance around telehealth questions. So there are 14 of us in the country, nationwide. There are 12 regional centers similar to us that support the different regions throughout the country. The NRTRC is responsible for Montana, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Alaska, Oregon, and Washington. So I love all of the analogies that my colleagues have made related to the size of Montana. We can all relate. I often say all of New England, plus some will fit into our boundaries, our state boundaries. It takes 9.5 hours to drive from the east to the west boundary. And oftentimes when I travel for work and people say, oh, you're from Montana, man, I drove through that state. It is the longest drive and there is no cell service. And very, very true. So the NRTRC is housed within the University of Utah, and that's our parent organization. And we also, as part of the Utah Telehealth and Education Network. So I'm very fortunate. My background is clinical, so I'm a nurse, and that is how I got involved in telehealth to begin with, because I worked, I actually live up in Whitefish. So because of technology, I get to join my team at the University of Utah every day via Zoom, and I'm just so fortunate to have that opportunity that many don't. And really what we believe in at the NRTRC is you should have access to healthcare services regardless of your zip code or the geographic location that you live in, which we all know that is, that's something that happens when you live in rural Montana. You may not have access, but you should still have access to healthcare. So a little bit about why I'm passionate about telehealth. When I was working in the hospital, which used to be Kalispell Regional Medical Center, is now Logan Health. I ran their telehealth department there. And it started very small. We started out with funding from the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the distance learning telemedicine funding. And we were fortunate to have a vascular neurologist who was born and raised in Montana in the Flathead Valley, went away for school, came back and said, I'm the only vascular neurologist in the state of Montana, and I want ranchers, farmers, tribal members, I want everybody to have equal access if they have a stroke or a neurological event and assessment in a timely manner via telehealth. And that was his passion, right? So he really drove this program. And I was just a young critical care bedside nurse at the time and really eager and thought this was a great idea and was on board, and we received the funding and we had to roll it out. So we had one of kind of the first telestroke programs in the country. And we started with Ronan and Libby and Plains, and then we rolled it out to the High Line. And I haven't been there for 4.5 years, but the program is still going strong. And last year, they gave their 100th dose of TPA, which is the clot-busting medicine for an ischemic stroke, which can be life-saving, can give an individual back many things that they might have lost in terms of their vision and their speech and their gait and their mobility. And it also decreases the cost on the healthcare system because the individual isn't living with these issues and needing therapies. So long story short, that's why I'm passionate. Excited to be at the NRTRC and have federal funding because now we get to realize that, yes, telehealth access is great, but in order to access a telehealth appointment, you need to have the internet. You need to have broadband. You need to have a device. You need to know how to use that device. You need to have a private space to have that telehealth visit. And all of that isn't available to everybody. Like that's where the equity comes in. And so there are many challenges. And prior to COVID, so I've been in telehealth for way before COVID, way before telehealth became cool and was life-saving in many ways. And so really this wasn't on our agenda prior to COVID. And just recently, as Francella pointed out, like, oh yeah, broadband access that's a thing. It's maybe the new SDOH, right? Like those, before we thought it was just people living rurally, but now as we're looking at the data that's coming out from telehealth usage during COVID, we're realizing that there are islands in urban areas where many people don't have access, not only to the internet, but to that private space or to the device. So some of the projects that I'm really excited about that we're working on related to digital equity, there's a couple. So one is called identifying TAPs, and TAPs are telehealth access points. Oftentimes they're community institutions like libraries, and they offer a place to provide internet, a private space, and a device. And oftentimes when we say, if it's not a library, if it's an existing community institution, anchor institution, we say adequate broadband is, can you stream a movie without it pausing or reloading or buffering? And then along with TAPs, though, comes a big challenge, right? And that's librarians, because librarians are now tasked, if they have a TAP, to be kind of a digital navigator or an expert in technology, right? And librarians wear a lot of hats. And so in our work over the last few years with this, we're realizing, wow, we need to provide some education for individuals that are assisting with telehealth appointments around digital navigation. So with CARES Act funding, we were able to create a free educational course called Navigating the Telehealth Neighborhood, a guide to telehealth access for digital navigators. And so this is a very comprehensive, quick course that has workflows and diagrams and resources for individuals that want to act as a digital navigator. So I think we'll have room to talk about this more, and so I'm going to save some of the things that we're really excited for 10 years from now, but I'm really excited to hear your questions and ideas and have further conversation. And also, thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
We're excited to have you guys. And now I'm going to turn to a question for Jenny and then go back to Jason. So Jenny, some of the things that Nikki was bringing up, especially about, I will say even in my own library, I go to the library all the time. I go to the Shaw Library that's in Washington, D.C. It actually was a trailer for a very long time until they got a building. And I know that I remember one day I had requested a room and I had to switch rooms with someone, and someone was doing an appointment in one of the cubbies. And I can't imagine, I don't know what they were talking about, but he was clearly talking to someone who's providing a service. And I think all the time about even we take for granted, even having those closed space, those private interactions that we get to have every single day when we're talking, whether it's in our homes or wherever you access internet. But I don't want to forget for us to couple that with, this is also about privacy and dignity and making sure that people can, whether it's learn, get information, get services. I totally agree with you there. Jenny, when you are thinking about, because Nikki also brought up, librarians are digital social workers. Everyone in this room knows that you guys are tasked with doing a lot of everything. When you think about the feedback that you have gotten from constituents, the people who use the library, the people who don't get to the library, what's something that's a piece of feedback you've received from one of them that informs how you do the digital equity work that you do?
Thanks for that question. Having been involved in this work for much of my career as a librarian, I think the most important thing that I can think about bringing to the table that marries the opportunities that libraries bring as information providers in that work and building community is just partnerships. When I look around this room, there are many people I know because of the important work of sharing information and expertise through the partnerships that libraries can create as community leaders. Jason mentioned that the Digital Academy is celebrating their 15th anniversary, and I'm quite certain it was 14, if not 15 years ago when we first met with the availability of the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program funds to expand public computing centers in libraries and to create digital literacy resources. We have a small staff, we have limited resources to do that work ourselves, and so we constantly tap partners like the Digital Academy and the Montana Cooperative Development Center. And I know we've been doing work in telehealth, and I'm really excited to continue to connect with Nikki so that we can bring these partnerships and resources to bear in doing that kind of work.
And also I want to revisit a comment. It's a question for Jason, but it's a comment that Carlos made. Carlos, you made a comment about that the children in marginalized households will be the adults 10 years later. And I do think that that's something that we should always take to heart. Just for a quick, I'm a huge fan of history, and just when we think about how secondary education was created in the United States, part of the reason why at one point people were able to go to college for free was because there was actually an economic idea that essentially when you support, like parents, there's actually a trickle-down effect to support their entire family, including their children. So that was actually part of the reason why at some point even some parts of college were free, but why even high school education was free in the United States. So when we think about education and the work that you're doing and really the need to be able to provide those services online for students that you do not have physical proximity to, because obviously you are covering an outrageously large geographic range, who are the partners that you are going to need to make sure that you guys are delivering on promises to have a sophisticated, digitally proficient workforce that you are currently training, to make sure that we're thinking about what does that look like in 10 years? So who are the essential partners? And also, what are the things that we should be thinking about now in terms of planting seeds that we want to bloom 10 years from now?
That's a great question. Thank you. There are many ways to look at this, but some of the ways that I look at it is, first and foremost, I hate talking about the pandemic, but it illustrated so much of the work we need to do in particularly digital learning and digital access across the United States. I heard a lot of stories that was referred to earlier of kids that are standing on their tippy toes in the side of their parents' property, a mile outside out of town, a half mile off the road, that were holding a phone up to get the one bar to be able to turn in an assignment during the early days of the pandemic. And those aren't stories that were told before that particular international emergency happened. And I've been very encouraged by the work that's been happening since that time, but those students are the ones that I think about the most when I think about building programs for students to access. But it's more important than just access itself. We have to invest in making sure that students are good, independent learners with critical thinking skills. And we hear those terms all the time to a point to where it's almost meaningless. But I think a lot of the dissatisfaction you heard about during the pandemic about distance and online learning was just not being prepared for that environment. We talk a lot about the 60% of students that were highly dissatisfied by where their school shifted, but there was 40% of students that were very satisfied with a distance learning environment. In fact, I can tell you our program had our highest student satisfaction ratings ever during the first 2 years of the pandemic because we had 10 years of experience delivering student-centered distance learning to students across the state. So what does that mean in investing? Well, I think that once you have access, you have to help folks understand how to use a digital learning tool. And it doesn't matter what that tool is, for the maximum benefit to where the student is going in the world. A key partnership, for example, we have had a lot of great conversations with the Department of Labor and Industry in the state of Montana. They are working on developing the next generation of a workforce for the state of Montana. We have shortages across several industries in the state, not the least of which is in public schools in the state. And while my organization is just one part of a much larger picture, we've made public partnerships. Our first one was with Dick Anderson Construction, which is a large construction company across the state of Montana, to work to put their materials into high school students' hands so that they could access what could be the entrance into a job just after high school is over with. And if I've learned nothing else in working in this space, is that there are lots of resources and lots of opportunities, but we have to both make them available to our students, but also make sure they know they're out there, right? There are so many great efforts that are funded by a variety of funding sources that really could provide a completely transformational opportunity for a student to get into a job of their preference, to help fulfill the needs of an industry. But a lot of this is working together and developing a larger community conversation about what already exists and helping students get plugged into that. With a state the size of Montana, if you go to eastern Montana, for example, and you're in a small town in that area, a lot of times the schools will talk about the opportunities in a North Dakota institution as opposed to a Montana one, which is, to me, an opportunity for us to work more to get communication and connections using digital resources in most cases to make sure that no matter where you are in the state, populated or not, that you know the opportunities are out there and you're given a chance to develop those individual personal skills to be really effective in an online environment.
Carlos, you talked a little bit about something that surprised me, that the app that you have for the Independent Living Center was one of the only ones in the country that is ADA accessible. And I think that in a way, there's something about that that grabbed me, especially because in a moment that we are focused on investing in communities that are, veterans, senior, older adults, people living with disabilities, low-income households. This is part of the investments that the federal government and also state governments are making now. When you think about the work that needs to be done in communities for people living with disabilities, what do you need from state or local officers, and how can organizations like the ones in this room be better partners?
Wow, that's a complex question. I could talk the whole afternoon about that. One of the things that I am disappointed about the Digital Equity Act and about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is that neither of these two pieces of legislation and more recent legislation revoked the sub-minimum wages that still exist in the state of Montana. Most people don't know, but there are people with disabilities in Montana working and being paid 25 cents an hour. And that's legal. That's called the Certificate 14C. It's a piece of legislation enacted in 1937 and is still in force. Mr. Governor, where are you? Make it illegal for any organization or entity to pay 25 cents an hour. Mr. President, Speaker of the House, please revoke this piece of legislation to empower the population who are disabled and aging financially to be included. Also, our Part C grant that comes from the federal government hasn't been readjusted in more than 10 years. We still receive $110,000 from the federal government for 1 year of independent living services. We receive $150,000 from Part B fund from the state. It's federal money that comes to the Centers for Independent Living through the state. And we receive another $150,000 from the general fund of the state. So we have less than $500,000 to provide services to a geographical territory that is 10 times New England, like my colleague just mentioned. So we need the resources, we need funding. I think a LIFT is the only center for independent living that has both an ADA accessible website and an app, because we saw the problem as an opportunity. And we wanted to be pioneers in solving the problem and demonstrate leadership in the area. But that was not enough, because in Yellowstone County, it costs $200 to have a high-speed internet at home. Only now fiber optics came to town.
I just want you to repeat that statistic just one more time, because that's something very important, especially for people that are online, to hear you say that someone paid $200 per month for their internet. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So in Yellowstone County, it costs closer to $200. How do I know? Because I used to pay $200 at home for high-speed internet. And I was able to change it to a new provider who uses fiber optics a week ago and start paying $77 a month for high-speed internet. In the frontier counties that we serve, in further southeastern Montana, central Montana, the cost of high-speed internet is minimum $50 a month. Maybe for somebody who lives in New York City, Washington, D.C., Providencetown, that's insignificant. But for somebody who lives in Montana and makes less than the federal poverty level, or $12,000 a year, lots of families live on $12,000 a year. $50 for internet is a fortune. They cannot pay that. They cannot buy a laptop for their children attending school.
And
so, you know, again, the Digital Equity Act will provide the money for us to pay. LIFT was able, during the COVID pandemic, to pay for our consumer internet connection using the CARES Act and the ARPA funding. We were also able to provide the technology to a few consumers. But as you know, those things cost a lot of money. They are expensive. Not only that, they get obsolete very quickly. So it's important to have those resources available and be strong financially to be able to have those things available. Another idea that Lyft wants to implement to promote digital inclusion is to have a library of laptops, a library of cell phones and other electronic devices to let our consumers use, borrow, and take anywhere in the country. There is a nonprofit in Montana called Montech. It's linked to the University of Montana, and they do that because they have a specific funding from that. We would like to imitate that program and have a library of equipment that our consumers would be able to borrow.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to make sure just to put a finer point on a couple of things that you said, because we don't have any control over the other legislation that you mentioned, but I do want to make sure that we are using the funds that we do have control over the best way that we possibly can, and that we are good partners to the communities that we say that we are here to support. So I just want to make sure of that. And also when we're talking about money, just to put a finer point on something that you said about affordability, I always want to remind people that low-income households are actually very close to a lot of us. They're not somebody else. If you are making $20 an hour at Starbucks, you only work 40 hours a week. If you take 2 weeks off within the year and you have 4 dependents, you are within $10,000 of the federal poverty line. So you do the math. I'm just letting you know that low-income families are everywhere around us. They're not actually somewhere else. They're actually sometimes in our own neighborhoods. So I just wanted to highlight that. I do want to make sure that I get just one more question in for Jenny before I open it up for questions from the audience. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, I want to make sure that we get to say that, and then also to make sure that we have an opportunity for you to say what your organization does in relation to this conversation, because I want to make sure we have space. And then just as a point, Nikki, that I was thinking a little bit about how you mentioned that you were classically trained as a clinical nurse, that you came into this work really trying to be supportive of making sure that Montana residents, wherever they were, could get access to high quality care. When you think about your organization's role in this work, and you think about how that has changed with the influx of federal funding, think about like what's next and who are the partners that you need next. What exactly do you need to make sure that we deliver on health, telehealth promises? Because very often telehealth is adjacent to the conversations we have. It is not the central target of the conversations that we have.
That is a great question. Thank you. I think moving forward, so we are federally funded, and some things that Carlos said really have stuck with me, because the funding is it's stagnant. It hasn't changed in 13 years, but cost of living, cost of travel, cost of resources has. So that was an interesting point. But I think as a telehealth resource center, what we really do, and this is something that Jenny spoke of, is we utilize our partnerships and we utilize grant funding as much as we can, and then we partner because we want to disseminate the resources for the best value. What I think in the future, a focus that we are going to have is partnering with community health workers. So not only librarians, but community health workers, and help to train them on digital equity. So digital learning, and not only for health, like that doesn't just apply to healthcare services or telehealth visits, that applies to applying for a mortgage or applying for insurance. I mean, nowadays everything is done online. And so if you don't have those skills or that access, you're kind of left behind. And so from a healthcare perspective and a telehealth perspective for our rural areas, our community health workers are very similar to our librarians. They are doing a lot, and they don't have like formal training in a lot of the areas that they are working, so potentially healthcare. So that's really kind of our vision. when you walked in, you saw these little flyers by the front door. Please take one on your way out. With CARES Act funding, one of the questions we got a lot was, how do I find a telehealth provider? And I don't know if anybody's ever Googled. Well, actually, show of hands, how many of you have actually used telehealth? Okay, great. So I would say more than 50%, so that warms my heart. It makes me happy, but when somebody would reach out and say, hey, I have, this rash and I need to see a telehealth provider, or, I need an urgent care telehealth provider, you can't really Google and get a good answer. So we use CARES Act funding to create a map. It's called Find Telehealth. And we worked with a partner that already was surveying health centers and what service they provided to include telehealth on their list of services. So now if you, there's 9 states in the Northwest and Southwest region that provides this data, and it's updated annually. You can find, like Ikalaka, very rural, you can type in what you're looking for, behavioral health, urgent care, nephrology, whatever service, and it'll pull up providers that you can see via telehealth or brick and mortar within, a 5 to 50 mile radius. And on that map, we've included telehealth access points. And so if you have access to a device in the internet and you go to the site, you can click taps and it'll show you every library or community institution that has registered that is providing tap services. So, please pick one of those up, and then I'm happy to answer questions now or after. So thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, were you going to respond? Oh, go ahead.
Nicole became a partner of Lyft today, a few minutes ago, because Lyft has a very successful community health worker program. So we will start offering telehealth to the population of our service.
Yes, I love that. That's why we're here, to build the people infrastructure behind these programs. And so I do want to, before we turn it over for the panel to have their final closing thoughts, I do want to open it up for the audience. If you guys have questions for them, if you will state your name, your organization, and your question, we'd love to hear from you. So while you guys are thinking, I'm just going to queue up my final question. And I was like, I don't want you to think there's no room for you, but if there is, if you do have a question, my final question was going to be focused on looking forward and how do we measure success. So for us, we are thinking about the fact that we are in a moment where we're literally investing billions of dollars across the country to change the digital ecosystem. Everything is going to be different after this moment, when we look back in history. When you think about your organization's role in this work, what do you want the digital ecosystem to look like? What are the goals that are still there? Because some of the investments that we are making are not going to cure all of the problems. And how will we measure success? So thinking about that, just to close, as our moonshot, how do we measure whether or not we got there? And what's the thing we're still working on? And so we're gonna start, if it's okay, that we'll start on this side and then work our way back down, or if you wanna jump in. But I just wanna do last call if there are questions in the room. Oh, yes, we do have a question, hold on. And just your name, organization, and your question.
So I'm Tracy McIntyre. I'm the director of the Montana Cooperative Development Center. We work across multiple of different sectors and stuff, and Jenny and I've partnered on discussions around broadband access and adoption. My question to probably Nicole, but actually all of you guys, is I do a lot of work around housing, and we're doing a housing study right now, specifically with senior and senior care included. Has there been discussions between your different organizations and the housing coalitions or the housing work that's happening? Because it seems like there's definitely correlation there.
Tracy, thank you so much. That is a great question. And yes, there's a huge correlation. We, interestingly enough, have partnered most with the San Francisco Tech Coalition, because they, as you know, the unhoused population there is quite large and just in scale. They have done a lot of work around creating these taps for unhoused populations in existing entities and in some of the affordable housing developments that are popping up. And so they've actually identified spaces and outfitted them to be a telehealth access point for unhoused. One of the challenges, and I've heard this from some of my colleagues as well, is disseminating that information that that's there. How do you reach the population to let them know that that's an option? So I'm happy to share my card and we can connect and I can introduce you to that team. They're great. What I love about this space, digital equity, is nobody wants to reinvent the wheel, right? We're not siloing. It's all inclusive. And so I'm going to pause and see if anybody else has a question in the audience before I kind of jump into my.
It's just Jenny's going to jump in on that question, and then we can come back to you, Nikki.
Thanks for that question. Tracy, we have not been involved in any formal conversations, but that's an opportunity that I'm very interested in as well. There are about 116, we use the term library outlets. It's a very sterile term for a very dynamic community space of libraries. That is not nearly enough for the geographic size of the state of Montana. And we are challenged to be able to provide more physical spaces for libraries, as well as housing in our communities, both for the unhoused as well as library workforce. And so I've had informal conversations about opportunities to partner in the creation of housing that can also co-locate library space and take advantage of funding and community opportunities that could address those needs in really collaborative ways. We've talked a lot on this panel about the challenges of geography in this state, and that's something that we are very interested in understanding as a barrier to providing library services. To offer an illustration, the Fort Peck Tribal Reservation is just a little bit smaller than the size of the state of Connecticut, and there are 4 libraries that serve the Fort Peck Tribal Reservation. The state of Connecticut has about 240 libraries. So that's just an illustration of the barriers that we are working to address. Housing is a similar kind of barrier, and I think there's opportunities for collaboration there.
Well done. We have another audience question. There you go, love. Name, organization question.
Hi, my name's Deborah Costa. I'm the finance director for Lyft. I've worked with Lyft for about 1.5 years now, and one of the major things that I've seen impact not only our company but our 18 counties is the federal mandate to track in-home care through what's called the EVV. And I don't know if any of you know what that is, EVV, Electronic Verification of Time. It's been a blast. Our rural communities, not only do we have problems with them having the devices, but they also have a problem with understanding how to use the devices, keep connected, and in listening to some of these things, I'm wondering if there isn't some way in working with the libraries to help educate people on how to use these programs, because it's a heavy burden on us and our 4 little PCA facilitators to try to train over 100 people on how to switch over to all this electronic technology and what they need to know. It's not a simple thing. It's very medical. And so they have to learn these terms, and some of these people just don't get it. So it would be nice to see if there was some way to collaborate with somebody in training these people or giving them access to more training so that it can be more accurate. On top of it, you're dealing with attitudes of, well, the government's watching me. We don't want to do this, And it's like, well, no, the government's not watching you. You can switch it off. You can do this. There's a lot of illiterate attitudes out there about how to use the technology, because there's a lot of misinformation about how the technology is being used. Can anybody here address any of those or have some ideas to improve support, because it's a load on our company. It's been over 1 year, and we've been successful. But some of the other centers, haven't been quite as successful. And what you have to understand is that we're trying to help people stay in their homes and live independently. That's the difference between an assisted living facility and the difference between training, you know, a cousin, an aunt, a grandmother that has stayed out in the reservation and never had a phone, a cell phone. So it's been interesting.
I would just add one comment. My organization would definitely be more at the source of that because we're serving primarily K-12 students, but I do think we have vastly underestimated the lack of tech savvy in our youth. 20 years ago, it was popular to say that, you know, let the youth guide us because they're better able to use computers and to be adept in technological pieces. Having run a help desk for an online program during my time at the Montana Digital Academy, I can assure you that plenty of students know way less than they should in regards to this. And part of what we try to do, and also I think a lot of schools are taking up this challenge as well, is understand that youth themselves do not bring a lot of tech savvy to the conversation, and we need a formal process to where we help them gain the skills that they need to be successful, which is not just learning critical thinking and not just being exposed to the extraordinary viewpoints that we do as part of public education, but also send them out with these very practical skills, because the bottom line is to access most services at this point, technology is not just optional, it's required.
I would say that librarians would be very interested in understanding more about the program and how we can be supportive of the program. I also wanted to address your concern about privacy. Montana has very strong privacy laws, as you know, and an opportunity to partner with libraries reinforces the confidentiality and privacy that librarians can bring to those kinds of efforts. So as trusted information professionals, that's some credibility that we could also lend.
And I just want to make sure there's no other question because I saw a hand and then I couldn't find it. So I just want to make sure if there's another question, we're also happy to talk afterwards. We're going to finish with just thinking about your moonshot goals, thinking about the future. Where does your organization sit in that digital ecosystem? What is the problem that you're still working on? And what do you need to, like, what are the metrics that you're using to get there, to measure success?
Okay, so what would that digital ecosystem look like? I would say inclusivity, right? Like that's where I was going to lead off before because that's kind of where I was going. But, you know, internet for all, equal access for all. Right now it seems like a very large undertaking, but when in the space that we are in and the partners that we work with on all extremes, from libraries to schools to healthcare providers to community health centers, FQHCs, RHCs, the amount of collaboration and out-of-the-box thinking that is going into this application for the competitive grant is so refreshing. It's also a little overwhelming, in all honesty, because it's so urgent, but just inclusivity. So everybody having the same access. When, you know, Carlos talked about the marginalized population not having access to technology and devices, and then in 10 years, they are the marginalized. Like, it is a cycle, and it's a cycle we've seen over and over for, you know, centuries. And I just commend all of the work that my colleagues and you all are doing to break the cycle. And how do we measure that? I don't know. I think we need to meet in 10 years and see where we're at and bring the wins. So I'm going to hand it to Carlos.
In 2 years of AGA accessible state-of-the-art website and app, Lyft experienced a growth in traffic of 750%. Isn't that amazing? 10 years from today, I expect us to experience a growth of 700,000%, meaning I expect everybody to know about Lyft and turn to Lyft to find the direction and guidance. Also, I expected the Digital Inclusion Act to be amended to address accessibility. LIFT stands for diversity, inclusion, and equity, but also for accessibility. There is no inclusion and equity without accessibility. And what I mean is, it's not only racial, religion, ethnicity, and other types of differences that must be included. Disabilities and aging as well, they deserve it. So there is a fourth column that sustains the new system that we are trying to change, and it's called accessibility, and LIFT is working to create awareness for that. Why? Because every human being who is not disabled today will be tomorrow. And people have disabilities and they are not aware of that. Or the disability is invisible. Anxiety is the number one disability. It's an existential disability, but it affects 200% of human beings. People have vision issues. If you use glasses, you have a disability. If you have diabetes, you have a disability. And those disabilities require accessibility tools for you to enjoy equal opportunity and equal access and live life to the fullest. We are on the dawn of a new era, and I want 10 years from today, I will be 74 and hopefully still working and promoting system change, but I want to see a transformation happening, a new Montana, and a plurality of people enjoying information and technology.
You probably could tell from some of the statistics that I shared that I am a data geek, and we at the State Library are data geeks. We think a lot about how we measure our successes, and some of them I think are fairly obvious. When the federal government modernized the E-rate program almost a decade ago now, they set forward standards or kind of best practices that libraries might strive for in terms of the adequacy of broadband that they provide in their communities. I can tell you that while a number of libraries in the state are doing well with regard to those metrics, the vast majority are not. So that's a relatively easy metric that we might turn to. There are metrics of affordability and access, the percentages of our population that we talk about that we know that are not online, and then we can slice and dice that by demographics and other information. So there are lots of ways to think about what success looks like in this space. The point that I would share, and maybe Clarice was getting to this a little bit, at the State Library, we say that all Montanans should have access sufficient to their needs. And that means that whatever that sufficiency look like is unique to the individual. And so Moonshot, I would have ways to understand and communicate with individuals to understand how they are living their life, including how they're able to get online and use information, is allowing them to thrive. As Director Bennett said, do people have access to information sufficient to their needs?
I'm a bit of a dreamer myself, which is part of the reason why I like being in the distance learning business. But 10 years from now and 20 years from now, my organization is probably just a small part of this, but I do believe what Carlos said, that we are entering into an extraordinary era that I think the internet promised in the late 1990s but didn't really deliver on, in part because we didn't take the internet seriously enough, I think, and also we allowed it to be directed not by human needs, but perhaps by corporate needs or needs to do things like collect data, for example. But for me, if we get to where I hope we are in 10 and 20 years, every individual, no matter their circumstance, their income, their zip code, or their age, should be able to access whatever information they need to live their life at their fullest and by their own choices. And I think that's something that we've always wanted for the United States of America, but I think the internet and what is evolving now as very fast-moving technologies could finally give us the opportunity to do that. But it won't happen without guidance from people like people in this room and online today. And if you're not part of this conversation, or if you're not thinking about how you can nudge this fast-moving space in your own way from the people that you serve or the people that you represent, then it's time to get in the game. And it is going to be an extraordinary decade, I think. And I hope that we're up to it. I think we are, but it's going to require all of us to jump into this conversation pretty darn quickly.
Thank you so much. First, I'll ask you guys to give a round of applause to this amazing panel. I'm so grateful for you. I also want to make sure that we thank the people, our hosts for this conversation. Slavin, thank you so much for opening up your house to us and being great partners with the state libraries, system of state libraries. Also to NTIA family, thank you so much, Grace, Robin, Rebecca, and also Angie, who couldn't be here because she was injured, just for being able to contribute to this conversation. For those of you who didn't actually speak up and people who might be watching online, I encourage you to make sure that you are taking ownership of your piece of this work, just your piece. I remember a student in Michigan, she told me, she said, start at home, start with what you love. That was it. And so it might be something really small. It might be teaching your neighbor. It might be doing something in an organization. But whatever's your small piece, just take ownership of it and do it well. So I am so grateful for all of you joining us today. Grateful for so many of you joining us online. We also want to encourage you, those of you who are in the room, to stay, meet each other. Make sure that you actually have met somebody before you leave this room. Because we already have some collaborations that are blooming, but we're so excited to see where this goes. So thank you again for joining us. We're incredibly grateful. Bye.